Hi. Welcome to Starz Recap. Today I'm going to explain an American supernatural horror TV series, Castle Rock, called Severance, which was premiered on July 25, 2018. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The story opens in the winter of 1991, as a young boy by the name of Henry Deaver has been missing for 11 days. The whole town of Castle Rock is looking for him, but now the snow has gotten too deep. This has forced the authorities to call off the search until summer. Elsewhere, a police officer named Alan Pangborn is sitting in his truck, listening to this news. But he goes to the woods anyway to continue searching for Henry. He adjusts his face mask, grabs a stick and starts poking around randomly in the ground. Suddenly, he hits something dense, as if there is a body underneath a thick pile of snow. Alan hurriedly begins to dig with his hands only to discover a deer carcass. He is slightly relieved and sits down nearby to have a cup of tea from his thermos flask. Alan is currently on a bluff near Castle Lake, which is completely frozen due to the cold. At this moment, he hears a strange but loud creaking noise coming from the woods around him. He scans the area and to his utter surprise, a young boy appears right in the middle of the lake. Alan rushes to the kid while yelling out his name, Henry. In the present day, Dale Lacey, the warden of Shawshank Prison, gets up early to make breakfast for his wife. She says he should have taken the buyout deal years ago. It is revealed that today is Dale's last day as the warden and he is retiring. She then kisses him goodbye and sends him on his way. Everything appears to be normal and Dale drives through the quaint town as usual. However, instead of heading to work, he takes a little detour into the woods and stops in front of the bluff at Castle Lake. The scene abruptly skips to a few moments ahead in the future. Dale turns off the car's radio and puts a noose around his neck. We then see that the noose is tied to a tree behind Dale's car. Suddenly, a dog comes out of a nearby brush and starts barking at him. Dale, nonetheless, punches the gas pedal, driving towards the cliff at high speeds. The noose beheads him even before his car can hit the waters of Castle Lake. A few days later, the new warden arrives at Shawshank State Penitentiary after the death of her predecessor. A guard takes her to the main office and mentions that all of the last 4 wardens have committed the unthinkable. An officer named Dennis Zaleski then gives her a rundown of the number of prisoners currently housed at Shawshank. The prison seems to be packed to the brim, except for Block F, which has been abandoned for the last 30 years. Dennis tells her that the last warden, Lacey, left the entire wing unoccupied for some reason. The warden, who is under pressure to increase the capacity of Shawshank, sends Dennis and another guard to go check out Block F. Moments later, the 2 officers are in the block, which is in an extremely dilapidated condition. Dennis soon finds a door on the floor of one of the rooms while his partner is busy elsewhere. He goes in and comes to a huge underground space which seems to have been an abandoned septic tank. Dennis looks around with the help of his torch and sees a can full of cigarette butts on the floor next to a chair. To his utter horror, there is a cage in front of the chair and a pale, extremely thin man is chained inside. Within a few short minutes, the entire Shawshank is alerted of Dennis' discovery and the stranger is brought up to the surface. The guards count all of the prisoners to make sure everyone is accounted for. They then fingerprint the stranger and give him a shower. He is quiet, malnourished, and seems scared of everything. After discovering that there are no records of him being a prisoner at Shawshank, the whole situation becomes a PR nightmare. The warden tells her officers that she doesn't want any of it leaking to the press. She then heads to the infirmary where the stranger is currently being kept and questions him. Initially, he refuses to talk, but after a while he mutters out a name: Henry Matthew Deaver. One of the guards, who was with Dennis earlier, seems to recognize the name. Elsewhere in Houston, Henry Deaver, a defense attorney, is currently fighting a court case for an elderly woman named Leanne. It is revealed that she had killed her husband in self-defense and has been sentenced to death penalty. Henry makes an impassioned appeal, pointing out that the cause behind the murder, and both of Leanne's past trials, are sketchy. He strongly asks the judge to consider reopening this case. Unfortunately, he loses the appeal and Leanne prepares for her execution later that day. Henry tries to console her, but she only wants to talk about her childhood memories. She even asks him about the first memory that he still remembers. In a quick flashback from 1981, we see Henry being rescued by Alan Pangborn, who puts the kid in his patrol car. The song 24 Hours from Tulsa by Gene Pitney is playing in the car. This is Henry's first memory and he doesn't remember anything before he was rescued. Back in the present day, Henry is the only person who stays with Leanne until the end. After the execution is over, he goes to the police counter and picks up Leanne's belongings. But this is when an alarm suddenly goes off and several prison guards race back to the execution room. When one of them reveals that Leanne has come back to life, Henry is taken aback. He runs back to the witness room and sees the guards trying to re-administer the drugs. Henry screams at them to stop, saying they don't get a do-over. But the cops close the curtain on him and force him to go away. Back in Castle Rock, the warden's people dig out all the info about Henry Matthew Deavers. Turns out, he went missing when he was 11 and the whole state searched for him. But they only found his adopted father, Mr. Deaver, who was almost dead from the freezing temperatures and his back was broken. The old man soon passed away thanks to his injuries. Just as the search mission was about to be called off, Henry reappeared, exactly 11 days after his father's death. The kid remembered nothing but the whole town blamed him for his dad's death. Now, he's a criminal defense attorney who works capital punishment cases in Houston. The warden doesn't think it's a good idea to contact Henry, but she also doesn't want to release the stranger. Her assistant suggests they can make him disappear as there are no records of him. Dennis, who is pouring coffee for the two, overhears their conversation. Back in Houston, Henry goes to Lizard Bowl Zoological Park to watch the staff feed alligators. While he's there, he gets a phone call from Dennis who says that the Shawshank Correctional Prison has one of his clients in custody. Henry thinks this is a joke and says all of his clients are dead. But Dennis insists and reveals that they found a kid in a cage and there's no one else who will help him. The lawyer asks for the caller's name, but Dennis hangs up on him. In the meantime, Molly Strand, the owner of a real estate company in Castle Rock, drives up into a school parking lot to meet her drug dealer. She tells him that she needs more drugs for some medical condition and grabs her latest batch. On the way home, Molly sees Henry get off the bus but doesn't think much of it. On the other hand, Henry walks around town, taking in all of the changes before heading home. Along the way, a man spots him and addresses him as killer. But Henry keeps walking and soon comes upon an empty parking lot next to a church. He gets upset standing in the middle of the lot for some reason. He then goes into the nearby church and finds a picture of his dad, a former reverend. In a flashback to 1981, Alan, who just found Henry in the middle of Castle Lake, takes the little boy home. He asks if Henry knows what happened to his father, but the latter doesn't say anything. He sits in the truck and watches on as his adopted mom, Ruth, runs out to get him. Back in the present day, Henry walks up to his mother's house and hears a smoke alarm as soon as he enters. A skillet is burning on the stove and there's no one around. It turns out Ruth is in the backyard looking absent-mindedly at her oak trees. When Henry goes to her, she mistakes him for a gardener. He tries to remind her that he's her son, but she keeps on blabbering irrelevant stuff. This makes it clear to Henry that his mother is suffering from dementia. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by Alan Pangborn, the ex-county sheriff who brought Henry home all those years ago. Ruth leaves to prepare a room for her son and Alan asks why Henry is in town. However, the latter is more interested in why Alan is hanging out with his mother. The old man replies that they enjoy each other's company and he has been watching over her. At the prison, the stranger who was discovered from Block F, creepily watches a mouse run along the wall. He sits quietly by himself, isolated from the rest of the prisoners. Soon afterwards, Henry arrives at the prison, but doesn't know the name of his client. The warden also gets news of his arrival and isn't happy about him showing up. She allows the lawyer to go through a notebook with all of the prisoners' photos, which conveniently doesn't include the stranger. Obviously, Henry doesn't recognize any of them and asks if there's anyone left out. The warden replies that it's pretty unlikely that they would have any of his clients since the state of Maine outlawed the death penalty. Henry finds it interesting that she knew he worked capital cases, since he never mentioned it himself. The warden tries to cover up for her mistake by explaining that she saw him on the news, but Henry knows that she's hiding something. He nonetheless leaves the prison and prepares to head home, but just then, he hears Dennis yelling at the prisoners to go inside. Henry instantly recognizes his voice as the mysterious caller. Later that night, at the Deavers household, Henry looks out the window and sees someone from the house next door looking at him. He doesn't think much of it and goes downstairs where Alan is having a drink. Henry shares everything about the mysterious call from Shawshank and asks for his input. But Alan dismisses the story, saying correction prisons are a whole different ballgame than regular prisons. As the two continue their conversation, Henry asks why Dale Lacey would kill himself. Alan replies saying that the job of a warden of such a large prison is an extremely taxing job. He then reveals that Dale killed himself by driving off the bluff at Castle Lake, the same place where Alan found Henry in 1991. Elsewhere, Molly takes out a cardboard box in her basement. She sets a timer for 1 minute and pulls out a missing poster with Henry's name on it along with a child's jacket. When the timer runs out, she packs up the box and puts it where it was. Later that night, Henry drives to the bluff and finds a memorial for Dale Lacey. He then walks over to the edge where he suddenly begins to hear Alan's voice in his head. We also notice the younger version of himself appear behind him, but the apparition quickly disappears. Back at the prison, Dennis is in the security camera room, reading a baby name book and drinking coffee. Some of the cameras start blinking on and off, but he doesn't notice it. When he finally looks up, he sees that the stranger they found in Block F is not in his cell any longer. This sends Dennis into a state of panic and he starts looking at different cameras to find the man. But while he's distracted, the stranger appears in a dark lit hallway. The light comes on shortly afterwards, and he stares directly at the camera. A frightened Dennis looks away for a second and all of the cameras change. When he looks back, there are dead bodies in every room. In a flashback, the events leading up to Dale Lacey's suicide are shown. The warden went to the mystery room beneath Block F where he kept the stranger in a cage. Dale lit a cigarette and instructed the stranger to ask for Henry Matthew Deaver when they find him in the future. That's my explanation for the American TV series, Castle Rock. Severance. So, what do you guys think about the movie? Write in the comment, turn on the notification and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.